Luke Thompson is one of my closest political operative friends. He has a stellar track record over the last few years working for the super PACs for many people, including Representative Riley Moore, Representative Brandon Gill, Senator Bernie Moreno, Senator Dave McCormick, and he was my boss for the super PAC supporting J.D. Vance. I have to nudge him and say he also worked for Jeb Bush. But Luke Thompson, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you, Ryan. We should get together more often.
Luke, I don't actually know, what was your first campaign?
Um, my first campaign, I want to say 7 years old. It was an attempt to pass a bond issue in my hometown to build a second high school because we had far outgrown the old high school. But we lost. My parents were pro mill levy increase. I think the only tax I've ever seen them be in favor of, because literally the students were going to class in trailers in the freezing cold.
This
Yeah,
So you were bred from this. Like there was
yeah.
no
This
other,
it's
there was no second choice.
it's in the blood. Yeah.
Okay, so I took questions from people on social media and I'm going to ask them. We'll just talk, back and forth. So the first question we got, which is the most frequent question I got, was how much money does it cost to run for office, even a local one? And
Great question.
yeah, I'll say this. It costs as much as it does to reach all the voters in your target universe. So, if you're running for local office like city council or school board or even Congress or state representative, you have, and not everyone votes. A small select group of people actually go and vote. The bigger the election, the more people vote. But you have to spend as much money as it costs to reach them. The rule I was always taught is you had to touch a voter 7 times. That doesn't mean to speak to them 7 times. It means to see a mailer, to just see your name in newspaper. To make sure a voter remembers who you are, they have to have seen your name 7 different times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rules of thumb out there about this, but I think another way to think about it too, because a lot of people who ask these questions are thinking about running themselves. I don't know what mental illness takes them over and makes them want to run for office. I'm grateful that it exists because I
Yeah.
make my living off of it.
Yeah.
But one other way to think about it too is like how much money do you as a candidate have to put in or be able to put in to be a credible candidate? And what's interesting about that is at a certain population level, everybody maxes or should, if you're going to be a serious candidate, maxes out the one resource that everyone has under a sort of universal communism, which is the clock. Like everybody has the same amount of time per day. Whether or not you use it all for politics or you have a personal life or things like that, those are separate considerations. But you and your opponent, at midnight of a given day will have the same amount of time, and how you use it is up to you. However, even at the state legislative level, some state house races in smaller states, you can just out hustle your opponent, right? In a lot of places, once you're even at the state senate level, it's not possible to simply knock on every single door enough times that everybody in who might vote knows you and has formed an opinion of you. And so that's where money really enters the equation. Is you have to be able to talk to people by proxy or through surrogate. The most primary surrogate mechanism is media. Lower down, you're typically going to be, having volunteers have literature to leave at doors. Sometimes those are the exact same thing that you mail to save money. You're going to want to get some phone banks. You might want to get an office space, or even in a co-working space. Might want to have a spot to drop things, or a storage unit. As you get higher and higher up, say you want to run for Congress, now you're talking about you will have a full-time staffer or several full-time staffers, depending on the district. You may use your family car for everything. You may want to lease a car for the term of your race because you're not going to be the only person driving it, probably. Or in fact, ideally, you won't be driving it at all because you'll be on the phone calling who? Donors, mostly. Um, the sort of rule of thumb that I have for people as they think about running for a congressional district, right? Assume it's an open seat. Assume it's set aside whether or not, from a party standpoint, you can win, right? What I say is go home, go through your phone book, go through your email, go through your classmates, etc. Make a list of people who, if they give you the maximum that you can donate, $3,500, right? Where you can get
That's for Congress,
300.
3,500.
That's for Congress or
Yeah.
any federal office, actually, where you can get 300 of those people. Because the reality is you're going to think you're going to close, I'll close 90% of them. You're going to be lucky if you can close 25%,
Right.
right? And so you need to have a list of 300 people who you feel high degrees of confidence, not 100%, but 75% or better, they'll cut you a $3,500 check. If you can't do that, or you don't know that many people with that kind of disposable income, the reality is it's going to be really, really hard. Now, you can compensate for that by putting your personal means in play. But now you're talking about, well, how much do I want to spend? How liquid am I? What percentage of that liquidity do I want to spend? I have 2 kids. My kids, I would like to go to nice schools someday. And so, I got to pay for that. Also, they might need braces. Got to pay for that too.
Right.
Right. And so, those are the kinds of ways people should think about this and have really hard conversations. Because if you can't raise from your network a solid, doesn't have to be mid 6 figures, but a solid 6 figure chunk, right? $250,000 between what of people you call, or if you're not able to cut a check that's bigger than that, you're really going to have a hard time hitting the sort of level of seriousness that's necessary. Now, the good news is, as you go through politics, you will meet people, and
Be
you will work
connected.
with people. You'll be
Yeah.
connected. Some of those people will be donors, some will be affected interest groups, etc. And so you can start knocking doors and work your way up. Riley Moore, friend and client of mine, who you mentioned, I ran his congressional campaign this cycle. The first thing I did for Riley, we were friends before he entered politics. In 2016, he sent me an email saying, "Hey, I want to run for House of Delegates in West Virginia. I've got, there's going to be 5,000 voters. Here's the voter file. Can you tell me which doors to knock on and which phone numbers to call?" Did a little bit of math and sent it back to him. He worked that list like crazy. And it wasn't a money question that got him that election. He won it by about 150 votes, I think. I may be misremembering. It may have been a little bigger than that. But, it's not a huge margin. And it was a hustle margin.
Right.
Now he's a member of House leadership as a freshman. So you can build it on a foundation of hard work, but it's a building block over time.
And you can, I mean, money. When Luke was talking about money, that's all for federal levels. For local elections, you can get by on less money. It's not necessary. You can do the hard work. I remember I did a race for state assembly from a guy. His name is Thamatis. Very, very nice guy, very wealthy guy, would not put the work in. He only wanted to work on Sundays because he didn't want to spend any time with his business. This man could sell snowballs and snowstorms, but I couldn't get in front of voters ever. And we ended up losing. He did extremely well, shockingly well. But he just putting the man hours in for a local office is super essential. So, okay, how does a candidate feed their families while running for office? Do they live off of savings, or they spend campaign dollars as a substitute?
So it's really hard. I would like a political culture that would sort of, I hate this word, but normalize people paying paying a salary out of the campaign. Because I think if you're a donor to a campaign, you should want the candidate to be working at that full time, not distracted by a job, right?
Right.
On the flip side, donors get really unhappy about you paying yourself a nominal salary out of your campaign. For federal races, it's completely legal. I think, I don't know exactly what the amount is. You have to disclose it. Most people don't do it because they feel like the political blowback is going to be worse than the upside. And so
Right. You
most
can
people try
pay
to.
for like meals if your team is going up for McDonald's or something. You can pay for that out of campaign funds or gasoline.
Yeah. Nobody's going to be mad if they see some meals and some gasoline. Now,
Right.
people will, to be clear, this is also where danger lies, because you'll see, especially bad candidates, will over itemize things, right? So it just makes their compliance really hard, and it winds up costing them more to sort their compliance than it would to just eat the light bulbs for $3 that they paid for, right? The flip side also is you will see people who will do things like buy gas cards, and all of a sudden they're kind of using the campaign as petty cash.
Right.
And that's where you can get in real trouble.
Okay. Uh, this is a great consult question. How do consultants have the good judgment to know who to work for? Who will be a strong candidate running for office for the right reasons, or who is an egomaniac who you won't follow your advice? I have worked for many an egomaniac that will not follow my own advice. I only ever quit one campaign my whole life from a state senator who was out of control, and like abusive to the staff. As far as like a good judgment, when you're for a lot of consultants, it's about who's going to hire you, right? Because it is a you only are ever really working for 2 years if you're working on just campaigns. It's important to realize people who work on campaigns don't always go to work for Congress or work in the state legislature for the governor or whatever race you're doing. It happens a lot, but a lot of people like Luke and I work for campaigns. We just do campaigns year after year after year. So that if that's your life, just the campaign hustle, you're always both looking for new work while doing work with the expectation that your job is only a year to 2 years long.
Yeah, I
So
mean
that's part of
that's why I do so many super PACs is so that I don't have to deal with the candidate.
it. That is true. When you work for Stupac, you have a lot less
Um,
anxiety moments. Yeah.
yeah, well, there's the anxiety is more donor related.
Yeah.
Are they going to give? They're not going to give. I know they
Right.
promised to. They won't come through. No, look. It's a really hard question, and the reality is when you're starting out in this business, you just have to hustle for everything, right? And you can wind up working with some real freaks and some real losers. And, the trick is not to get stuck there. And that requires a kind of, I think, moral discipline to say, yes, I know John Smith sucks. I know he's not going to win. And thank God he's not going to win. But damn it, the John Smith for, selectman campaign is going to be the best damn selectman campaign anyone's ever seen. And in my experience, when you do a good campaign, people will notice. Not always, but sometimes they will notice. So a campaign can transcend its candidate. The other thing you can do is just do what I do and convince your friends to run for office. Which is they
Do
I
I
don't
have to, Luke? No, not really. Okay. I guess I have to run. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Well, this is the bait and switch I pull. Is I spend years convincing them they should run for office. Then when they finally sit down with me and they're like, "I'm ready to have the talk," the first thing I said is, "You don't want to run for office. It's stupid. Why do you want to run for office? You have a great life. Your life is good. Your spouse likes you. You're doing well in business. You see your children every day. What are you out of your mind? What do you want to run a low grade fever for the next 15 months? Like what? You want to hear the same joke 55 times? You want to tell it
You have to
550
sell the
times?
same joke 50 times.
Yeah,
You have to
no,
tell the
it's
same exact story. Yeah.
yeah,
I,
but no, I think one thing to keep in mind, and this is especially true, I think, as the millennial population boom enters into sort of middle age. Like, there's no definition of who a candidate is or what a candidate looks like. The barriers to entry that I enumerated are very real, right? To be clear, they're very real. On the other hand, they're not fatal, right? They can be overcome if you're strategic. And so, go out and meet people who volunteer, meet people who knock on doors, assess whether you think they're good people, whether they're smart people, whether they're thoughtful people, whether they're hardworking and honest people. Politics can be a business with a fair amount of deceit in it, but both within a legislature and I think within a campaign, honesty is the currency that you have above all else.
right.
And as
That's
long as you have an honest relationship with your client as a consultant, and as long as you instill in your client that, especially if going into a legislature, you cannot lie to your colleagues because they will never trust you and never forgive you and isolate you and make you miserable.
You want
Um,
to name any names or should I? I'm
no,
just
no,
joking.
I won't. Well, I'll use an affirmative example. I when our mutual friend Vice President Vance was then baby Senator Vance, he went into the Senate as something of a hotshot, well-known entity, conservative firebrand, etc. But his attitude towards the Senate, we talked about this a lot, was like, I'm going to be straight with people. I know they disagree with me on several issues, but I'm just going to act with complete integrity. And I understand some people are going to be sneaky around me, but my colleagues will see that. They'll see that I act with integrity and they will trust me. And down the line, that will pay off. And he was able to build relationships with people who were not ideologically akin to him, right? Susan Collins is a great example of this. They don't agree on a lot. There are a lot of issues where they go back and forth, but they were always very straight with each other. He really admired the way that she operated and the way that she was very upfront and told people where she was on things and learned a lot from her, conveyed his gratitude to her for that. And as a result, here in this confirmation fight, when he sat down and talked to her about certain nominees, that carried a lot of weight because she knew he wasn't lying.
All right, that's a great example. Or you could be a senator from many senators who they copy their colleagues' bills, they reintroduce them for themselves to claim credit for it so they can get hits on right-wing media, then they just write books endlessly and toward the books until they do some other job, like, for a complete random example, become the president of the University of Florida or something. I don't know, who knows. But yeah, allegedly. Um, this is a great question to follow up the last one. How do you convince a good person to run for office, and can you dissuade a bad person who shouldn't be running for office? So I'll say for the
I mean,
bad
yeah,
people, I'll
go ahead.
say sometimes the party bosses or the powers that be or major donors can sit there and they could say to them, they use a carrot and say, listen, if maybe you could run for a party delegate, maybe you could have this position, maybe you could have that position, but don't run for the office you want to run for. Or they could use a stick and say, if you do this, we're going to spend $1 gajillion against you and ruin you. So don't do it. Like, people do that. Can consultants do that? Not really, not so much. I mean, I've never seen it personally where a consultant can like just bully somebody out of running for office.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I think in general, though, this is really asking the same question, which is how do you motivate people in relation to public office? And the reality is that everybody who thinks about running for office is ambitious, right? They
Right.
don't do this because they don't want to win. And I think we have a culture that treats ambition as a crime, and that's foolish. They're ambitious, right? I mean, there's not a single person who pulls papers for state legislator that doesn't think in some dark moment in the back of his or her mind about the Oval Office. Like they just all. And it's okay. No, it's okay.
It's
Like whether
100% the truth, though. Everyone, if you're running for like dog catcher, you're thinking I could be
you're
president.
thinking, I'm 3 pit bulls away from state selectmen, and from selectmen, then I'm going to run for that state senate district. I'm going to jump over the lower house entirely, and once I'm in the state senate, Annie bar the door because I'm going. This rocket ship ain't stopping.
Yeah, it's true.
And you know what? Good, right? I mean, the framers of the Constitution, the founders of this country, were utterly unabashed about their desire for virtuous fame, right? For earned fame, and they talk about it in speeches and their private writings and their correspondence, etc. The desire for ambition, the ambition for office, prominence, esteem, leadership, power, fine. The hedonic treadmill is a universal. And so don't go around looking for someone and saying, well, I don't like this person because he's ambitious, but I do like this person because she doesn't seem like she wants the office.
Right.
Right. No.
They very rarely win if they don't really want.
Right. Either you're misreading her and she's really actually quite ambitious, or like she's just not going to put in the time. And that's fine, right? Like, but don't try to dragoon somebody into something they don't really want to do, because the reality is they're going to put themselves and their family and sometimes you through hell, but not nearly as much as you will be putting them through hell. Now, they're also the principal, they're the candidate, and so it's to them redounds the benefit, redounds the fame and the power, etc. You are a staff player, you're a bit player, you are support.
Right.
And don't ever forget that.
That is so true.
Don't ever forget
Consultants should never be more popular than their candidates they work for. What is the impact on a candidate's family, and what should they expect, and how should they prepare for it? That's
It's
a
really
good
hard.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really hard. So, you know, a lot gets demanded of the family because simply absence is a big part of that, right? I mean, when are prime campaigning times? Weekends when you might be, going to games, you know,
Summer, fall,
summer,
yeah.
while people are commuting.
Vacations you're missing.
Yep, exactly. So, one thing is to be very clear with your family up front, like, hey, look, this is going to cost us things. And have frank conversations. As a consultant, also, you need to build a trusting relationship with the spouse. All right? Like, the spouse is never the problem. And if the spouse is the problem, you need to get out of that campaign because it's
Right.
dysfunctional.
That's a good point.
But in a situation where you can't just be like, oh, he's being unreasonable, or she's being unrealistic. Like, you're asking way more of the spouse than is reasonable to ask of anyone, even if you're running for like state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having spouse problems, it's because you failed to manage expectations or you failed to execute. Now, that's not a huge issue. Just learn and get better and think about it in that way. The best way to think about that is the same way you think about a candidate. What are the motivations and what are the aspirations? Right?
And
Like,
that's what you go into a marriage sometimes thinking about, like, is this person, you should know, like, oh, my spouse is going to do something someday and I have to be prepared for it. Like,
correct,
it's not,
correct.
if they have that fire in them, it's probably never going to go away.
Yeah, and look, like I ask every client I work with, like, have you had the talk? Where is Mrs. or Mr. X on this? And if Mr. or Mrs. X is not all in, then I tell them you really shouldn't do this. You know, I know people who fresh off a divorce want to run for office because it's like I got to get some purpose back in my life, and it's like, well, that's try therapy in church because this is not a spiritual hospital. Like that we, yeah, no, that's
Yeah. Okay. How in depth are background checks, and when you want to run and they bring in a consultant for background checks? Okay, so background checks don't happen usually for local office. A lot of times they don't happen even for congressional offices. Remember, George Santos won his election without anyone knowing anything. And well, most people don't know anything. No one picked up on it. He could have been picked up on it. Luke made a face at me. That's why. Yeah, but George Santos had a million red flags flopping in the wind, the size that you would see a flag that you would see at a car dealership in like Midwest. That's how big the flags were, and they were not picked up until the until like the New York Times brought it up, trying to write a puff piece about him and saying, "Oh wow, nothing he says makes sense." So for local office, very rarely to ever being picked up. Maybe if you're like running for mayor or something like that, but very rarely. Higher office, it happens more. I mean, there are people. It is very expensive to do big background checks on people, but there are people who do it. It costs a lot of money.
yeah. There are degrees of vulnerability study, right? You should pay somebody to run a LexisNexis whack on you and just run your name and addresses through LexisNexis
Yeah,
because that's not that expensive, and that's 85% of what most opposition research is going to look like,
and
even
yeah,
even
and
at the
for God's
commercial.
sakes, by the way, clear your social media history. Clear it. I don't care what it is. Download every picture off of your Facebook that you want to keep and wipe it clean. Wipe everything clean. The amount of candidates who lose because they were insane on social media 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago is daunting and it's absurd.
Are you,
Clear your social media.
Ryan? Are you admitting that you have a nude Africa account to a?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Um,
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that's valuable here too is, a lot of times people don't understand what opposition research is. They think, oh, opposition research, it's going to be a PI going through my trash to see if I'm cheating on my wife. Look, if you're running in a competitive frontline Senate district, yes, someone's going to ruffle your trash, probably, but maybe not, right? Um, the reality is that most opposition research surfaces tendentious things that can be spun a certain way. Oh, you had a boundary dispute with your neighbor. Very normal thing, right? We weren't sure where the liens were. We couldn't figure it out. We wound up going to court, right? In 2014, when I was at the NRSC, we spent millions of dollars convincing Iowans, which was pretty easy to do because it was true, that Bruce Braley, then a congressman running for Senate against Joni Ernst, was an asshole because he sued his neighbor over some chickens, right? Now, Bruce Braley, if you ask him, like, hey, are you an asshole? He's going to say, no, I'm not an asshole. Okay, but you run a Lexis search on him and you go, ugh, sued your neighbor over some chickens, huh? Oh, that's going to leave a mark.
Yeah.
I can write that out, right? And so it's often really pedestrian things that you wouldn't think about, right? Oh, I had somebody file a complaint against my insert small business over insert totally normal thing. We disputed it, it went away, etc. Right? Oh, pregnant lady in car accident left hung out to dry by candidate Y. Again, on the merits, you can win these things a lot. And in some cases, as I've done in a few races, you can get takedown orders if they try to put it on broadcast TV. But, like, you want to know what those are so you can pre-butt them. And, sometimes these things happen live and on the fly, and you can't anticipate what they're going to be because they're just crazy. The Ohio Senate primary,
That was
I
wild.
was, yeah, I was working for Bernie Moreno's super PAC, and like, one of our opponents was shopping this story that he had an adult friend finder account that was like obviously a prank and obviously had never been used. They shopped it and shopped it and shopped it. And like, I'm sure they were doing this on the campaign side as well. I was on the super PAC side. We were killing it over and over and over again. And then a week before election day, the Associated Press runs the story with glaring factual errors in it, like glaring factual errors. But they just run the story. And like we were prepared. We retaliated. We took it down. We found the guy who built the initial database infrastructure for Adult Friend Finder, and he was just like, "Yeah, iPhones didn't exist in 2006, you idiots! Like, this isn't geolocated. This is just a lat-long lookup table." Which we could tell, and we sort of had that ready to go, but we needed an authority to rebut the AP story because the AP had run this thing and put it in print, which was insane.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of this is a long-winded way of saying, like, there's some stuff that's just going to happen. Now,
But
if you're
it's not as in depth, especially for local office as you would think. I think that's
right now,
that's mostly a movie version of what running for office like that
yeah.
is.
Now, if you are addicted to drugs, if you have a gambling habit and like 18 extramarital relationships going on, or really any extramarital relationships going on, first of all, don't have the time to run for office. You are already overcommitted. But like, just don't. Just don't. All right. This is not the place to work your shit out. Okay. It's just not. Like, America will be fine. We don't need you in this capacity.
Some men would rather run for office than get therapy.
Many such cases.
Okay, I'm going to ask 3 more questions really quick because I
Okay.
know it's been a while. So, first, how much better is internal polling compared to public polling? And do the campaigns know a lot more than the news organizations? So, I will say this. One, it's not about, because a lot of people do public polls, also do internal polls. It is not a matter of necessarily that they know more. It's kind of what kind of polls are they doing? Is it a mixture of text message and phone calls? Is it a live caller? Is it just internet? It's really about the polling organization than necessarily who does it. Tony Fabrizio, who did President Trump's polls, and he did JD Vance's U.S. Senate polls. He also does polls for the Wall Street Journal. They don't look very much different than each other. He's not trying to hoax the Wall Street Journal because he's giving the good stuff over to President Trump. It's also what kind of questions do they ask. Poll campaigns will ask different types of questions. They'll ask persuasion questions like, hey, if I talk about this, or if my opponent believes this, how will it sway the election? Journalists or news organizations are not going to ask those same type of questions. So it's a different style of question that they're going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, news, as a general proposition, all things being equal, private polling is better than media polling, right? In general. It's better because the campaigns are going to spend more because it's going to guide strategic spending. They're also going to be better because they're going to be better written. Because
most news organizations, by the way, do not pay for any polling. I've learned that they pay. Yeah. It's free. It's for basically publicity for the pollster.
Some do.
Some do. Not most do not. Yeah.
Just media is interested in election anticipation polling. That's their goal. They want to know who's popular, who's unpopular, how happy are people with the country, what's the ballot going to look like, right? It's if the election were held today, that's what they care about. When we're writing polls for a campaign, we're thinking about our ad budget, and we're thinking about what segments of the electorate do we need to work on? What messages work with those people? What are the aspects of us that we're not hitting on? What are issues that are really important, and are we messaging on them effectively? Where are we getting bounced by our opponent, et cetera, et cetera? And especially in primaries where structural factors don't matter as much and strategy is more important. Sorry, that's just the truth. You can start to see, like, okay, which parts of the party and ideological tendencies or demographic tendencies are moving with which person, who's really vulnerable, etc. I'll use another example from the Ohio Senate race. Frank LaRose, who I like, I've got a good relationship with Frank. This is not a personal thing. This is a professional thing. Frank was running against my client, and Frank had traditionally been, if you had done a poll on which parts of the party he was most popular with, it would have been more moderates versus very conservative voters. Recognizing that this was going to be a problem in a Republican primary, he undertook projects to bolster his conservative bona fides. Right. Totally normal candidate behavior. That's not cynical. That's politics. Like, it's the smart, right thing to do. And it helped. It drove up his fave on fave with very conservative voters. It damaged him with his previous base of voters because they were like, oh, this isn't the guy I thought it was. Maybe I'm not such a big fan of Frank. And I saw this in the polling over time as I looked at where Frank was doing with tendencies. And I knew that I had some messaging that would really undercut his stance with social conservatives. I had from the research and et cetera, I had put together all this stuff. And essentially what I found was that he was out on a limb that I could cut off behind And that's not me, the ballot on any of those polls, and even the fave unfaves, they weren't actually useful to me in and of themselves. It was only who's he most popular with, who's he least popular with, how do these issues resonate, etc. And so it was about putting together the combination of, if every campaign is a question of time, territory, and resource, right? I had a pretty good sense of what my resource was from money. I needed to know what my ideological resource was, or what my ideological territory was. And then timing was just a matter of getting close to election.
At what point do you tell your candidates, quote, homie, shit is bad? That was one of my questions. So
It's a great question.
it's a great question. So, like, first of all, you need to be bluntly honest with your clients, like in a very, very unnormal, not a normal way that you would do with like your friends. I had a client one time who I was being very polite to, and I was like, you need to go, before we take pictures to use everywhere, you need to get your teeth cleaned because your teeth are orange. Like, I can't emphasize this enough. You need to be so blunt with them and be like, no, this is not working out. Like, you need to do something with yourself. When the race is coming down to the wire and you just sit there and say something, if it's a matter of winning and losing, if you also have to know your client. If your client is just delusional, and I've had a few of them, and you're like, look, you're not living in the world that I'm living in, so if you're having a good time, you're having a good time. But there are people that you can sit there and say, that you're it's a serious win or loss thing. You need to sit there and say, you need to A, invest more money, or B, stop investing money because there's no amount of money to get you out of this hole. Like, you need to be out there to protect them, and that's crucial. Perfect example from history was like Susie Wiles in 2016 telling Donald Trump, I think she needed like $1 million or $10 million more dollars. I think it was $10 million to win Florida for him. She's like, I need $10 million more dollars cash from you right now. And he screamed and he cursed. This is in Politico and other news organizations. But Susie Wiles had a track record for winning this election. She knew she could do it, but it was bluntly honest. And he cut her the check, and she helped win Florida in 2016, not by less than a point. So it's a matter of really knowing yourself, where the state of the race is, and then being confident with your relationship with your client. And listen, they could fire you, is the worst they could do. But that's really where it is. They have to understand where they are, and there are some delusional clients, but a lot of them literally live on nerves all the time. And generally, it's the clients who always think they're going to lose, or something terrible. They're the easier ones to deal with, and the ones who are confident they're always going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I guess 2 bits of just tactical advice here. One is, you should never have the "it's bad" talk when the client brings it to you. You need to set the terms of that, decide when it's going to happen, and you need to say, hey, we need to have conversation. Because if they bring it to you, they're just going to be spun up, and like, they won't trust you. They won't feel like they will be like, wait, you knew this and you didn't bring it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that, hey, things are bad, like, get it on the calendar, and like, get it on the calendar fast, and you need to bring it to them, right? Number one. Number two, if you're going to lose by more than 10 and the client doesn't know that, I mean, as long as they're not spending their own money, like, you should be blunt with them, but it's not, obviously you don't want to hurt the family. You don't want them to suffer embarrassment, etc. But you need to have strategic conversations around that sort of thing. If it's going to be a race that's going to be within 10 points either way, then the answer is, and then the answer is twofold. One, you don't actually know if they're going to win or lose, right? You just don't. Be honest with yourself. And number two, say to them, look, you could win this or you could lose this. It's close enough that no data that I provide you is going to change your behavior either way. So just act like you're down by 5 and go bleep, bleep, bleep campaign. Right?
Yeah. Last question. This is a good one. What is the craziest thing you've ever seen in your consulting career on a campaign?
Found a dead body in Mississippi once.
You found a dead body in Mississippi?
Yeah, I found a dead body.
What campaign was that?
It was it's behind me. It's the Thad Cochran for Mississippi Senate campaign 2014.
The dead body was behind you. Thad Cochran for Mississippi Senate. Where did you stumble on a dead body?
It was in an ex-urban neighborhood. I want to say, I don't remember where it was vis-a-vis Jackson.
Did they still sign the petition to get the can on the ballot?
No. It was during the runoff, so they were already on the ballot. I didn't. I called it in. There's a police report. So.
I did a campaign one time where it was a really eccentric guy, very wealthy guy in New Jersey, who told one of knocking on doors in kind of more rural New Jersey, and they said, he said, "How can I earn your vote?" And this old lady was talking at the door, and she said, "You can get rid of the beehive on my roof." And he climbed the roof, was stung 1,000 times, and kicked off a beehive, and was being stung repeatedly. I've done a race in Ohio where a man opened his trunk to put not palm cards, door signs in it, and there was not hamsters, it was not ferrets. It was
ferrets.
It was gerbils. It was gerbils. There were gerbils in the trunk of his car, and I said, "Sir, you have gerbils in your car." He said, "Oh, you should see my garage. They're all over the place." As if that was like the absolute normal response. I mean, my favorite Luke Thompson story was one time you did a camp. You were you were in West Virginia. Not West Virginia, Western Maryland, and doing a campaign. And you said you were working in the door, and someone started saying a conspiracy theory to you, and then a second person came with an even crazier conspiracy theory, where the first conspiracy theory said, "This is too much. This guy's nuts."
Yeah, no, it was at a polling place. I'd had somebody who'd gone into details about and I mean details about some chemtrail stuff to me. I mean details. And then somebody else came by and unloaded like a whole other thing, and the chemtrails guy looked at me and was like, "That guy's out of here, man. I don't know. That's pretty nuts." I had a guy answer the door shirtless but packing heat, and his pet rooster ran out and tried to get in my rental. That happened once. I have a toy rooster that the kids working on that campaign got me to commemorate that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I mean,
amount of people who answer the door naked is actually startling.
you see some wild shit. Like
It's
the number of people who sit in their chairs shirtless eating cereal out of the box and just migrate directly to the door in that state of affairs. It's like very high. It is a non-trivial percentage of the population.
Luke, thank you so much for being on this podcast. I really appreciate it. Where can people go to find your stuff if they want to see you? Your Twitter is really funny. It's a lot about Kansas sports.
Yeah, I mean, I guess LT Thompson on Twitter, no N at the end, is the best place to go. Ryan, you just got to throw a retweet on there, and then
I will 100 do it. I 100% do it for sure.
I probably toned it down a little bit as I've gotten older, but there's a few bangers out there.
Keep it saucy, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Luke, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Yeah, thank you for listening. We will be back next week. Please like and subscribe on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.